The stars looked the same as they always did, cold and distant. Captain Dongmin stared out the bridge window of the Taeguk and wondered if any of those points of light held worlds that respected humanity. Probably not. The Taeguk was not a pretty ship. Her hull was patched with different metals that created a rainbow of rust colors across her surface. Some panels were earth steel. Others were salvaged alien alloys that the Galactic Dominion had thrown away. The ship looked like what it was, a collection of scraps held together by human stubbornness and cheap welding. Dongmin ran his hand through his black hair and sighed. 3 years. 3 years since Earth had been granted trial membership in the Galactic Dominion. 3 years of being treated like children who might break the grown-up toys. The humans could have one ship. One single vessel to prove they were worthy of joining the real galactic community. The Taeguk was that ship. The bridge door hissed open and Chief Engineer Bo-Ra walked in. Her blue jumpsuit was stained with engine grease and her hands were covered in burns from hot metal. She was small but tough. The kind of person who could fix anything if you gave her enough time and spare parts. "Captain, the hyperdrive is making that noise again," she said. Her voice was tired. "The grinding noise or the whistling noise?" Dongmin asked. "Both now. I think the coupling is loose. We need to stop and let me work on it." Dongmin nodded. This was the life of a trial species. Their faster-than-light drive was a hand-me-down from a Dominion cargo ship. It worked but barely. Every jump was a risk. Every system pushed far beyond what it was designed to handle. "Bo-Ra, how long until we reach the supply station?" 4 more jumps if the drive holds together. "Maybe 5 if I have to baby it." "And if it breaks completely," Bo-Ra shrugged, "then we drift until someone finds us. Or we don't get found." The Dominion does not send rescue ships for trial species. This was the reality humans lived with every day. The Galactic Dominion ruled over thousands of worlds. Their crystal ships could cross the galaxy in days. Their energy weapons could crack planets. Their shields could stop anything. But humans were not allowed to have any of it. They were too primitive, too violent, too unpredictable. The navigation station beeped and Wu Jin looked up from his screens. He was young for a navigator. Only 25, but he had memorized every star chart the Dominion had shared with Earth, which was not many. "Captain, we have a priority signal coming in." "It is not from Earth," Dongmin frowned. "What kind of signal? Distress beacon? Dominion frequency. It is coming from the Kepler sector." "That is off our route," Bo-Ra said. "Command told us to deliver medical supplies to Station 7. No detours." Dongmin stared at the navigation display. The Kepler sector was empty space according to their charts. Nothing there but radiation and asteroids. But someone was calling for help. "Wu Jin, can you clean up the signal? Find out what is saying." The navigator worked his controls. Static filled the bridge speakers. Then slowly words became clear. "This is Research Station Alpha. We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack. All Dominion ships respond immediately. We have critical data that must not fall into enemy hands." The message repeated over and over. Each time it got a little weaker. "Captain," said Hei-Wan from the weapons station, "we should report this to Dominion Command and continue to our destination." Hei-Wan was older than the rest of them. She had served in Earth Defense Forces before joining the Taeguk crew. She understood military protocol. Follow orders. Stay in your lane. Do not make trouble. But Dongmin could not ignore people in danger, even if those people looked down on humans. "Bo-Ra, how far out of our way is the Kepler sector?" 2 days at best speed. 4 days if we take it easy on the hyperdrive. And we have enough fuel, barely. We would have to skip our next scheduled maintenance stop. Dongmin made his choice. "Set course for the Kepler sector." "Best possible speed, Captain," Hei-Wan said. "We have orders. The Dominion does not want trial species interfering in their business. The Dominion also does not want their people to die when we could have helped them," Dongmin replied. Wu Jin lay in the course. The young navigator smiled. "Yes, Captain." Course laid in. Bo-Ra shook her head, but she was smiling too. "I will go prep the hyperdrive. Try to keep it in one piece for a few more jumps." As the crew prepared for the course change, Dongmin thought about what they were doing. Earth Command would not be happy. The Dominion might see this as humans overstepping their bounds, but someone was calling for help and the Taeguk was the only ship in range. The hyperdrive engaged with its usual collection of grinding and whistling sounds. Space twisted around them and the stars changed position. They were now racing toward an unknown emergency with a ship held together by luck and spare parts. "Time to destination?" Dongmin asked. 18 hours if everything holds together," Wu Jin replied. And if it does not, then we hope someone comes looking for us. Dongmin settled into his captain chair and watched the stars stream past. The Taeguk was not the fastest ship in the galaxy. She was not the strongest or the most advanced. But she had something the crystal ships of the Dominion did not have. A crew that would risk everything to help strangers. The distress signal continued to repeat, getting weaker with each transmission. Whatever was happening at Research Station Alpha, it was bad. And getting worse, Captain Bora called over the comm system. I am reading some unusual energy patterns from the hyperdrive. Nothing dangerous yet, but keep an eye on our speed. Understood. How unusual? Like nothing I have seen before. The drive is working, but it feels different. Almost like something is pulling on us from the destination. Dongmin did not like the sound of that. Space was full of dangers that could trap unwary ships. Gravity wells. Radiation storms. Worse things that the Dominion charts did not mention, but turning back was not an option. Someone needed help. The Taeguk would answer that call even if it killed them all. The ship jumped again, closer to whatever was waiting in the Kepler sector. The Taeguk dropped out of hyperspace with a violent shudder that rattled every bolt in her hull. Emergency lights flashed red across the bridge as systems struggled to come back online. Through the viewports, Dongmin could see something that made his blood run cold. Research Station Alpha was under attack. The station was huge. Much larger than anything Earth had ever built. It hung in space like a crystal flower with dozens of transparent arms reaching out in all directions. But half of those arms were dark, broken. Sections of the station drifted away like petals torn from a dying bloom. Around the station moved shapes that hurt to look at. They were ships, but not like any ships Dongmin had ever seen. They seemed to flicker in and out of existence. One moment they were solid metal. The next they were transparent as ghosts. When they fired their weapons, the energy beams passed through the station shields as if the shields were not even there. "What are those things?" Wu Jin whispered. "I do not know," Dongmin replied, "but they are killing everyone on that station." The distress signal was still broadcasting, but now it was different. More desperate. "This is Admiral Quan Ho of the Dominion Navy. Station Alpha is falling. We have critical research data that must not be lost. Any ship in range, please respond." Haewon checked her weapons display. "Captain, we have 6 missile tubes and 2 plasma cannons. Against whatever those things are, it will not be enough." "Those are void swarm ships," Bora said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "I read about them in the old Dominion historical files. They were supposed to be extinct." "What is the void swarm?" Dongmin asked. "Ancient enemy of the Dominion. They fought a war 1,000 years ago. The Dominion won, but barely. The swarm ships can phase between dimensions. That is why energy weapons pass right through them." On the main screen, one of the flickering ships turned toward the Taeguk. Even at this distance, Dongmin could feel something wrong about it. Like it was not completely real. "They have seen us," Wu Jin reported. "The ship is moving in our direction. Evasive maneuvers. Take us around to the far side of the station." The Taeguk was not built for combat, but she was built tough. Bora had made sure of that. The ship dove toward the station using the massive structure as cover from the approaching void swarm vessel. "Captain," came a new voice over the communication system. "This is Admiral Quan Ho. Identify yourself." Dongmin hesitated. Dominion officers did not usually talk to humans as equals. "This is Captain Dongmin of the Earthship Taeguk. We received your distress call." There was a long pause. "Earthship. You are trial species. You should not be here. We came to help. How many people are on your station?" Another pause. 200 researchers and security personnel. "But we cannot evacuate. The swarm ships destroy any vessel that tries to leave." Dongmin looked around his bridge. His crew was waiting for orders. They all knew this was not their fight. Earth had no stake in whatever was happening here, but people were dying. "Admiral, we are going to try to reach you. Can you guide us to a docking port?" "Impossible. The swarm will destroy you before you get close." "Let us worry about that. Just tell us where to dock." This time the pause was longer. Finally, Admiral Quan Ho spoke again. "Docking Bay 7 on the lower ring. But I warn you, this is suicide. These creatures are beyond your understanding. We will see about that. Wu Jin, take us in." The next few minutes were the longest of Dongmin's life. The Taeguk raced through the debris field around the station while void swarm ships hunted them. The enemy vessels moved like predators, fast and silent. When they fired their weapons, the energy beams came from multiple directions at once, as if the ships were in several places simultaneously. Bo-Ra worked miracles with the engines. She rerouted power from life support to the thrusters. She shut down non-essential systems to give them more speed. When a swarm ship got too close, she fired the emergency retro rockets to suddenly change direction. There. Wu Jin pointed at the station. Docking Bay 7. The bay doors were open and lights were flashing to guide them in. But between the Teguk and safety was a void swarm ship. It hung motionless directly in their path like a spider waiting in its web. HFY, target that ship. All weapons. Captain, our missiles will pass right through it. Maybe. Maybe not. Fire when ready. The Teguk launched everything she had. 6 missiles streaked toward the enemy ship, followed by plasma cannon fire. Just as HFY predicted, the energy beams passed through the swarm vessel without effect. But the missiles were different. They were solid matter. Physical objects that existed in only one dimension. 3 missiles passed through the target harmlessly, but 3 others struck solid hull and exploded in brilliant flashes. The void swarm ship flickered and became fully solid for a moment. Long enough for Bo-Ra to push the Teguk past it and into the station docking bay. The bay doors slammed shut behind them as emergency lights bathed the area in red. Through the airlock window, Dongmin could see figures in Dominion uniforms waiting for them. Admiral Quan Ho was not what Dongmin had expected. The alien was tall and thin with blue skin and silver eyes. His uniform was perfect despite the battle raging outside. When he spoke, his voice was cold and formal. Captain Dongmin, you have made a serious error coming here. This situation is beyond the capability of trial species to understand. People needed help, Dongmin replied. That is all we need to understand. The Admiral studied the human crew with obvious distaste. Your primitive weapons cannot harm the void swarm. Your ship is barely space-worthy. You will all die here for nothing. Then explain it to us. What is the void swarm? Why are they attacking your station? Quan Ho was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. Come with me. I will show you something that will change everything you think you know about this galaxy. He led them deeper into the station through corridors filled with panicking researchers and damaged equipment. The walls shook each time the swarm ships fired on the outer sections. Emergency announcements echoed through the hallways, warning of hull breaches and system failures. They reached a heavily guarded laboratory where alien scientists worked frantically at strange machines. In the center of the room was a display showing something that made no sense. Ships that existed in multiple dimensions, weapons that fired probability instead of energy, technology that operated on principles completely alien to everything the Dominion understood. This is what we have been studying, Admiral Quan Ho said. Void swarm technology. For months we have been trying to understand how they phase between dimensions, how they make our shields useless, how they disappeared for 1,000 years and where they have been hiding. Bo-Ra moved closer to the displays. Her engineering mind was already working on the problem. These power readings, they are not using energy the way we do. It is something else entirely. Quantum uncertainty manipulation, one of the alien scientists said. They make reality itself into a weapon. Our energy shields work by deflecting or absorbing incoming attacks. But the swarm attacks exist in multiple probability states simultaneously. Some pass through, some strike solid matter. We cannot predict which. That is why our missiles hit them, HFY realized. Physical matter exists in only one dimension. It either hits or it does not. Admiral Quan Ho nodded reluctantly. Your primitive kinetic weapons are more effective against them than our advanced energy systems. It is embarrassing. The station shook again and alarm klaxons wailed. Through the laboratory windows they could see more void swarm ships arriving. Dozens of them flickering in and out of existence like hungry ghosts. Admiral Dongmin said, How long before they break through your defenses? Minutes. Maybe less. The outer ring is already lost. Then we need to evacuate your people. Get them to our ship. Quan Ho shook his head. Impossible. The swarm will destroy any vessel that tries to leave, and this research data cannot fall into their hands. If they learn what we know about them, they will become even more dangerous. Then we take the data with us. The Admiral stared at the human captain. You would do this. Risk your ship and crew to save Dominion personnel, even after we have treated your species as inferior. Dongmin met his gaze steadily. That is what people do. They help each other. For the first time, Admiral Quan Ho looked uncertain. The proud Dominion officer who had dismissed humans as primitive was seeing something he did not expect. Courage without calculation. Help offered without conditions. Very well, he said finally. We will attempt evacuation. But I warn you, the chances of success are very small. As if to prove his point, the station shuddered again and the lights went out. Emergency power flickered back on, casting strange shadows through the damaged research station. Admiral Quan Ho led the evacuation with military precision, while Dong Min coordinated with his crew. 200 Dominion personnel needed to reach the Teguk before the Void Swarm broke through the final defensive barriers. Captain, Bo-Ra called over the comm system. I am reading massive energy buildups from those swarm ships. Whatever they are planning, it is going to be big. Through the station windows they could see more enemy vessels arriving. The flickering ghost ships surrounded Research Station Alpha like wolves circling wounded prey. Some appeared solid for brief moments before fading back into dimensional uncertainty. Others seemed to exist in multiple places at once, creating confusing sensor readings. Dr. Jinne was among the evacuating scientists. She was young for a researcher, and her uniform was torn from crawling through damaged sections of the station. In her arms she carried data storage devices containing months of Void Swarm research. This information must reach Earth, she told Dongmin as they hurried through collapsing corridors. The Dominion Science Consortium refused to listen to my theories about quantum uncertainty warfare. They said I was too radical, too willing to challenge established thinking. What kind of theories? Dongmin asked while helping injured researchers move toward the docking bay. The swarm does not use advanced technology the way we understand it. They use the basic uncertainty of reality itself as a weapon. Every particle in the universe exists in multiple probability states until it is observed and measured. The swarm has learned to keep their ships in those uncertain states. An explosion shook the station, and sections of the outer ring broke away completely. Through the gaps in the hull they could see Void Swarm ships moving closer to the central core, where the docking bays were located. How much time do we have? Admiral Quan Ho demanded of his remaining security chief. 10 minutes until they breached the inner defensive grid. Maybe less. The evacuation was not going well. Too many people trying to move through damaged corridors. Injured personnel who could not move quickly. Essential equipment that the researchers insisted on bringing with them. Every delay brought the swarm ships closer to breaking through. Wu Jin was monitoring the enemy movements from the Teguk Bridge. Captain, 3 swarm vessels are moving directly toward our docking bay. They will be in weapons range in 5 minutes. Heywan, can you target them? I can try, but our remaining missiles will not be enough, and the plasma cannons are useless against targets that can phase between dimensions. Dongmin made a decision that would have gotten him court-martialed in any proper military. Bo-Ra, I need you to overload the hyperdrive. Captain, that will destroy the ship. Not completely overload. Just enough to create a massive energy discharge. We can use it as a weapon. That is insane. The hyperdrive is not designed to be used as a bomb. Most of our equipment is not designed for what we use it for. Make it work. This was the difference between humans and the Dominion. When Dominion technology failed, they followed proper procedures and waited for replacement parts. When human technology failed, they fixed it with whatever was available and made it do things it was never supposed to do. Bo-Ra disappeared into the engine compartments with a toolbox full of improvised solutions. Within minutes, she was rerouting power systems and bypassing safety protocols that had kept starships safe for thousands of years. Dr. Jinne watched the human engineer work with fascination. She is modifying quantum field generators to create an unstable energy matrix. The Dominion would never approve such modifications. The Dominion is not here, Dongmin replied. We are. The last groups of evacuees reached the docking bay as Void Swarm ships began their final assault on the station. The enemy vessels no longer bothered with subtle phasing attacks. They hammered the defensive barriers with pure destructive force until the energy shields collapsed completely. All personnel aboard, Admiral Quan Ho reported. The station is lost. Bo-Ra, are you ready? As ready as anyone can be for something this stupid. When I trigger the discharge, it will create an energy pulse in multiple dimensions simultaneously. If my calculations are correct, it should force the swarm ships into a single probability state for several seconds. And if your calculations are wrong, then we all die in a very spectacular explosion. The Teguk undocked from the dying research station, just as the first Void Swarm ships reached the central core. The enemy vessels moved to intercept the escaping human ship, but they were not expecting what happened next. Bo-Ra triggered the modified hyperdrive and space itself seemed to scream. Energy discharged in directions that did not have names, creating a pulse that existed in dimensions the Dominion had never mapped. The void swarm ships caught in the blast were forced into solid reality for the first time in centuries. Now Haywan, hit them with everything we have left. The Teguk weapon systems were pathetic compared to Dominion warships, but against targets that could not phase away they were devastatingly effective. Kinetic missiles struck solid hulls and tore through armor that had never been designed to stop physical impacts. Plasma cannon fire that would normally pass through dimensional ghosts now found real targets to burn. 3 swarm ships died in the first seconds of the attack. The survivors flickered back into their uncertain states, but they were damaged, confused. For the first time in 1,000 years, void swarm vessels were running from battle. Incredible, Admiral Quan Ho whispered. You have done something the entire Dominion Navy could not accomplish. You have hurt them. We got lucky, Dongmin replied, but he was thinking about what Dr. Jinne had said. The swarm used uncertainty as a weapon, but humans were very good at dealing with uncertainty. They had spent their entire history adapting to things they did not understand. The Teguk limped away from the destroyed research station with her hull scorched and her engines barely functional. But she was alive, and so were all 200 Dominion evacuees who had never expected to be rescued by a primitive human vessel. Captain Wu Jin called from the navigation station, I am detecting massive void swarm fleet movements throughout this sector. Hundreds of ships, maybe thousands. Dr. Jinne looked up from the research data she was studying. They are not just attacking individual stations anymore. This is the beginning of a full invasion. The swarm is coming back to finish what they started 1,000 years ago. Admiral Quan Ho activated the long-range communications array. I must warn Dominion Command. The fleet must be mobilized immediately. But when the communication went through, the response was not what he expected. The voice that answered was cold and dismissive. Admiral Quan Ho, you will report to Dominion Command for debriefing. Your claims about void swarm activity are being investigated. Investigated. Fleet Admiral Youngsu, the swarm is real. They destroyed Research Station Alpha. They are preparing for invasion. You will submit your report through proper channels, and you will explain why you allowed primitive humans to interfere in Dominion military operations. The communication ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Dr. Jinne shook her head in disgust. They will not listen. The Science Consortium has spent decades convincing themselves that the void swarm is extinct. They cannot admit they were wrong. Then we take the data to Earth, Dongmin decided. Human scientists are not afraid to be wrong. They are afraid of not learning from their mistakes. Admiral Quan Ho looked around the damaged bridge of the human ship, at equipment held together with spare parts and hope, at a crew that had risked everything to save strangers, at a captain who made decisions based on what was right rather than what was safe. Captain Dongmin, I formally request permission to accompany you to Earth. The Dominion may not listen to warnings about the swarm threat, but perhaps your people will understand the danger we all face. It was an extraordinary request, a Dominion admiral asking for help from a trial species. But these were extraordinary times. Permission granted, Admiral. Welcome to the crew of the Teguk, as the battered human ship headed toward Earth with its cargo of rescued scientists and forbidden knowledge. The first void swarm invasion fleets were already moving toward Dominion space. The enemy that had been thought dead for 1,000 years was very much alive, and this time they had learned from their previous defeat. The galaxy was about to discover that sometimes the most advanced civilization is not the one with the best technology. Sometimes it is the one most willing to try something completely new when the old ways stop working. And in that contest, humans had advantages that the proud Dominion was only beginning to understand. Earth looked different when seen from space after witnessing the destruction of Research Station Alpha. The blue and green world seemed fragile and small compared to the crystal cities of the Dominion. But it was home, and it might be humanity's only hope of stopping the void swarm invasion. The Teguk limped into Earth orbit with her hull scarred and her engines barely functional. Emergency repair crews swarmed over the ship, while Dr. Jinne and Admiral Quan Ho were rushed to the Global Defense Council headquarters. What they brought with them would change everything. Dr. Jinne stood before a room full of Earth's best scientists and military leaders. Her voice was steady despite the exhaustion that showed on her face. The Void Swarm is not using advanced technology. They are using the fundamental uncertainty of quantum mechanics as a weapon. Their ships exist in multiple probability states simultaneously. General Park Min-ho leaned forward in his chair. He was the head of Earth Defense Forces, and had spent years preparing for the day when humanity would have to prove itself worthy of galactic citizenship. Dr. Ginny, are you saying our weapons can hurt these creatures? Kinetic weapons, yes. Energy weapons, no. The swarm ships can phase through energy attacks, but solid matter forces them to choose a single quantum state. That is their weakness, Admiral Kwan-ho added his own testimony. I have seen human weapons damage void swarm vessels when the entire Dominion Navy could not. Your primitive technology may be our salvation. The room erupted in discussion. Scientists argued about quantum mechanics while military officers debated weapons modifications. But in the end, it was Tae-hyun from the Mars shipyards who asked the important question. How much time do we have? The swarm invasion fleets are already moving toward Dominion space, Admiral Kwan-ho replied. 6 months. Maybe less before they reach the core worlds. Dr. Yoon-jung from the Seoul Institute of Technology stood up. We can modify our existing weapon systems. Magnetic railguns that fire rounds in quantum superposition, missile warheads that adapt to enemy defenses. It is possible, but we will need every shipyard working around the clock. What about the Dominion? General Park asked. Will they accept our help? Admiral Kwan-ho looked uncomfortable. Fleet Admiral Young-soo has dismissed my reports as fantasy. The Galactic Council believes the Void Swarm is extinct. They will not listen until it is too late. Then we prepare alone, General Park decided. If the Dominion will not accept our help, we will be ready when they finally ask for it. 3 months later, the first reports reached Earth of Void Swarm attacks on outer Dominion colonies. Entire systems went silent overnight. Crystal cities that had stood for millennia were found floating as debris in space. The enemy that the Dominion thought was dead had returned with a vengeance. The Taeguk had been completely rebuilt during those 3 months. Her hull was now lined with experimental armor that could redirect energy attacks through dimensional folding. Her weapon systems included railguns that fired rounds existing in multiple quantum states and missiles, filled with Earth nanotechnology that could adapt to any defense. Captain Dongmin stood on the bridge of his transformed ship and marveled at what human ingenuity could accomplish when properly motivated. Chief Engineer Bo-ra had outdone herself. The ship still looked like it was held together with spare parts, but now those spare parts included some of the most advanced quantum weapons ever built. Captain, Communications Officer Chang-ho called from his station. We are receiving a priority transmission from Dominion space. It is Admiral Kwan-ho. The hologram that appeared above the bridge showed a desperate alien commander. Behind him, explosions lit up the darkness of space. Captain Dong-min, the swarm has reached the Centauri system. Fleet Admiral Young-soo's battle group was destroyed in less than an hour. The Galactic Council is finally ready to listen. What do they want from us? Everything. Every ship Earth can spare. Every weapon modification your people have developed. The Dominion Navy is in full retreat and we need human tactics to stop the invasion. Dong-min looked around his bridge crew. Tactical Officer So Young was running final checks on the new weapon systems. Navigator Wu Jin was plotting jump coordinates to Dominion space. They all knew this might be a one-way trip. Admiral, we will be there within the day, but I need you to understand something. We are not coming to save the Dominion. We are coming to stop the swarm from reaching Earth. Understood, Captain. And Captain, thank you. The journey to Dominion. Space took 18 hours through hyperspace, lanes that were clogged with refugee ships fleeing the advancing swarm. When the Taeguk arrived at the rally point, she found the remnants of the once mighty Dominion. Navy. Fleet Admiral Young-soo had been relieved of command. The new leader was Counselor Ra Jin, a practical alien who understood that pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. He met with Captain Dongmin aboard the flagship Eternal Glory, a massive crystal ship that dwarfed the human vessel. Captain, your ship is very small compared to our battle cruisers, Ra Jin observed. Size is not everything, Counselor. Sometimes being small means being hard to hit. The Void Swarm destroyed. Ships 10 times larger than yours without effort. The Void Swarm destroyed. Ships that fought the way the Dominion has always fought. We fight differently. Rajin showed Dongmin the tactical displays. Hundreds of swarm ships were advancing on 3 fronts. Their flickering ghost vessels moved through space like a plague, consuming everything in their path. Behind them followed the emptiness where star systems used to exist. Our energy weapons are useless, Rajin admitted. Our shields cannot stop their attacks. Our sensors cannot track their movement patterns. How do you propose to fight creatures that exist outside normal reality? By being completely unpredictable, Dongmin replied. The swarm adapts to known threats by following programmed responses, but they cannot adapt to pure chaos. The first test of human tactics came when a swarm scouting force encountered the reformed Dominion fleet. The enemy ships moved in perfect formation, their quantum-phased hulls flickering between dimensions as they prepared to attack. The Dominion commanders expected the humans to fall into standard battle formation. Energy weapons at maximum range followed by organized retreat when the shields failed. Instead, the Taeguk and her sister ships did something completely insane. They scattered in all directions, firing weapons in patterns that made no tactical sense. Captain Hyunwoo of the rebuilt cargo hauler Arirang launched mining charges at empty space. Commander In Young of the patrol ship Mugunghwa used navigation sensors as communication arrays and routed her life support through the weapons targeting system. The Void Swarm ships tried to adapt, but their programming could not process attacks that had no logical pattern. When Gunner Byung-ho fired earth bacteria at enemy vessels, the swarm computers spent precious seconds trying to classify biological weapons as a military threat. Engineer Kyung-min on the supply ship Taebaek deliberately overloaded his reactor to create false sensor readings that showed his ship in 12 different locations simultaneously. The swarm vessels wasted energy firing at targets that did not exist while the real ship slipped away unharmed. For the first time in months, Void Swarm ships were retreating. Not because they were outgunned, but because they could not understand what they were fighting. Incredible. Counselor Rajin whispered as he watched the tactical display. Your chaotic tactics are actually working. This is just the beginning, Dongmin replied. Wait until you see what we do when the real battle starts. But even as the first victory was celebrated, both leaders knew the truth. The scouting force was nothing compared to the main swarm invasion fleet. Thousands of enemy ships were converging on the Dominion capital system, and all that stood between them and total galactic conquest was a handful of human vessels, held together by spare parts and stubbornness. The final battle for the galaxy was about to begin. The main Void Swarm invasion fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Thousands of ships that flickered between reality and nightmare moved through space in perfect formation. They had learned from their encounter with human chaos tactics and were adapting their approach. Captain Dongmin stood on the bridge of the Taeguk, watching the enemy advance on the long-range sensors. Behind him, the combined human fleet prepared for a battle they probably could not win. 12 ships total. Most of them converted civilian vessels with experimental weapons that had never been tested in real combat. Captain reported Navigator Wu Jin. The swarm fleet will reach firing range in 30 minutes. And the Dominion reinforcements. Fleet Admiral Young-soo is bringing everything they have left. 200 ships, including their most advanced battlecruisers. Dongmin nodded, but he was worried. Young-soo had been restored to command after promising to follow human tactical advice. But the proud Dominion officer still believed that superior technology and overwhelming firepower could solve any problem. The Dominion fleet arrived in a blaze of crystal and energy. Their ships were beautiful and terrifying, with hulls that seemed to be carved from pure light. Weapons that could crack planets. Shields that had never failed in 1,000 years of warfare. Fleet Admiral Young-soo contacted the Taeguk from his flagship, Galactic Pride. The alien commander looked confident, despite the approaching swarm armada. Captain Dongmin, my forces are ready to implement your chaotic tactics. We have studied your previous engagement and prepared countermeasures for swarm adaptation. Admiral, with respect, you cannot prepare for chaos. The moment you try to organize it, you have already failed. Nonsense. Military operations require discipline and coordination. We will use your random firing patterns, but within a proper tactical framework. Dongmin wanted to explain that Young-soo was missing the point entirely. Human tactics worked because they were genuinely unpredictable. Trying to organize randomness was like trying to schedule spontaneity, but there was no time for lessons in military philosophy. The Void Swarm fleet opened fire from maximum range and space, filled with weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Dominion ships raised their shields and prepared to return fire with their most powerful energy weapons. It was a massacre. The swarm attacks phased through Dominion shields as if they were not there. Energy beams that could destroy asteroids struck crystal hulls directly and tore through armor like paper. Within minutes, half of Young-soo's fleet was destroyed or drifting dead in space. All ships retreat, Young-soo ordered in panic. Fall back to the secondary defensive line, but the Void Swarm was not finished. They had been waiting 1,000 years for this moment. Their ships moved through the retreating Dominion fleet like wolves among sheep, destroying everything they touched. Human vessels, came a new voice over the communication system. This is Admiral Quan Ho aboard the damaged cruiser Eternal Honor. The Dominion fleet is broken. You are our last hope. Dongmin looked around his small bridge crew, 12 human ships against thousands of Void Swarm vessels. The odds were impossible, but that had never stopped humans before. All ships, this is Captain Dongmin. You know what to do. Make it up as you go along and try not to die. The human fleet scattered across the battlefield like seeds in the wind, each ship operating independently without coordination or communication. To any military observer, it looked like complete chaos, which was exactly the point. Captain Hyunwoo of the Arirang fired his main engines directly at a group of swarm ships. The exhaust plume was not a weapon, but the enemy vessels tried to phase through it and discovered that superheated plasma existed in all dimensions simultaneously. 3 swarm ships materialized just long enough to be incinerated. Commander In Young of the Mugunghwa used her navigation deflectors as improvised particle beam weapons. The system was never designed for combat, but it created energy patterns that the swarm computers could not classify or counter. Enemy ships found themselves being pushed out of their quantum phase states by forces they did not understand. The supply ship Taebaek under Engineer Kyungmin had been loaded with medical supplies for the Dominion colonies. Instead of retreating, Kyungmin launched the supplies at enemy vessels. Bandages and medicine containers struck swarm hulls that had been forced into solid reality by the ship targeting systems. It should not have worked, but somehow it did. Gunner Byung-ho on the patrol vessel Dokdo had run out of conventional ammunition hours ago. Instead, he was firing everything he could find in the cargo hold: tools, spare parts, personal belongings, even the contents of the ship recycling system. The Void Swarm adaptation protocols had no response for attacks using garbage and lunch leftovers. But the most effective human tactic was the complete lack of tactics. Each ship captain made decisions based on instinct and improvisation. When conventional weapons failed, they used unconventional ones. When normal strategy proved useless, they tried abnormal strategy. The swarm fleet began to falter. Their perfect formation broke apart as ships struggled to adapt to threats that made no logical sense. For the first time in their history, the Void Swarm was facing an enemy that could not be analyzed or predicted. Admiral Quan Ho watched from his damaged ship as human vessels danced between the much larger swarm ships. They are not fighting a battle, he whispered to his aide. They are performing chaos. The tide of battle shifted when Bora on the Taeguk had an inspiration. She linked the ship quantum drive directly to the weapon systems, creating a feedback loop that should have destroyed them all. Instead, it created a pulse that forced every swarm ship within 1,000 kilometers into solid reality simultaneously. Now, Dongmin shouted over the fleet communication channel. Hit everything that looks solid. The human ships opened fire with every weapon they had. Kinetic projectiles, chemical explosives, mining lasers, cargo manipulator beams, even emergency flares. For 30 seconds, the Void Swarm fleet was vulnerable, and the humans made those seconds count. Dozens of enemy ships died in the barrage. The survivors flickered back into their quantum phase states, but they were damaged and confused. Their perfect coordination was broken. Their adaptation protocols were failing. All human vessels came a transmission from the Dominion capital. This is Galactic Emperor Seok-jin. I am witnessing something I thought impossible. You are defeating the Void Swarm. But Dongmin knew better. They were not defeating the enemy. They were just forcing them to retreat and regroup. The swarm would adapt to human chaos eventually. They always adapted. The real question was whether humanity could stay unpredictable long enough to matter. Emperor, he replied, we have bought you time. Use it wisely. The swarm will return, and next time they will be ready for our tricks. As the human fleet limped back toward the rally point, Dongmin realized that everything had changed. Earth's trial vessel and her sister ships had done something the mighty Dominion Navy could not accomplish. They had forced the Void Swarm to retreat, but victory came with a price. The galaxy now looked to humanity for leadership in a war they barely understood against an enemy that defied all logic. The trial species had become the teacher. And the lesson they taught was that sometimes the only way to win an impossible fight is to refuse to fight it the way your enemy expects. 6 months after the Battle of the Crystal Nebula, the galaxy was a very different place. The Void Swarm had retreated to the Outer Rim, but their defeat had shattered more than just their invasion fleet. It had broken the Dominion belief that advanced technology and rigid hierarchy were the keys to survival. Captain Dongmin now held the rank of Admiral in the newly formed Galactic Defense Alliance. The Taeguk had been rebuilt again, but this time with full access to Dominion technology, combined with human innovation. She was still held together with improvised solutions and spare parts, but now those parts included quantum processors and dimensional stabilizers. The bridge looked different too. Alongside the human crew sat alien officers who had volunteered to learn human tactical methods. It was not easy for beings raised on military precision to embrace chaos as a weapon, but necessity was a powerful teacher. Admiral reported Communications Officer Chang Ho. "We are receiving signals from the deep space monitoring stations. The Void Swarm is moving again." Dongmin was not surprised. The enemy had used the past months to study human tactics and develop countermeasures. The next battle would not be won as easily as the first. What is their formation pattern? That is the strange part, sir. They are not using formation patterns at all. The swarm ships are scattered across multiple star systems with no apparent coordination. Admiral Quan Ho, who now served as Dongmin's strategic advisor, looked worried. "They are copying our chaos tactics. The swarm has learned to be unpredictable. This was the problem with fighting an adaptive enemy. Every victory taught them how to counter your next attack." The Void Swarm had spent months analyzing human battle recordings, and now they were using randomness as a weapon, just as effectively as humans did. "Sir," called Navigator Wu Jin, "long-range sensors are detecting swarm ships moving toward the Sol system. They are targeting Earth directly." Dongmin felt his blood run cold. The enemy had learned the most important lesson of all. To defeat humans, you had to threaten what they cared about most: their home. "All ships prepare for immediate departure. Set course for Earth maximum speed," Admiral Quan Ho protested. "We should coordinate with the main fleet. Follow proper strategic protocols." "There is no time for protocols. By the time we organize a proper response, Earth could be ash." This was another lesson the galaxy was learning. Humans did not fight to protect abstract concepts like galactic peace or territorial integrity. They fought to protect each other. And when their home was threatened, they would throw away every rule of warfare to defend it. The journey to Earth took 2 days through hyperspace lanes that were clogged with evacuating civilian ships. When the human fleet arrived, they found the Sol system under siege by a Void Swarm force that had learned to fight like humans. The enemy ships moved without pattern or coordination. Some attacked the outer planets, while others targeted shipping lanes. A few seemed to be attacking nothing at all, creating the kind of random chaos that had once been humanity's greatest weapon. But Earth was ready for them. Dr. Jinneh had used the past months to establish the Terran Institute of Practical Sciences in orbit around Luna. The station was a maze of experimental laboratories where human and alien researchers worked together on problems that the old Dominion science centers would never have attempted. "Admiral Dongmin," her voice crackled over the communication system. "We have been monitoring swarm tactical evolution. They are using randomness, but it is programmed randomness. Mathematical chaos rather than genuine unpredictability." "What is the difference?" "True chaos cannot be duplicated or predicted. The swarm is using chaos algorithms, which means their randomness follows mathematical rules. We can counter mathematical rules." Chief researcher Daewon had been working around the clock to develop new weapons that could fight adaptive chaos with genuine unpredictability. His team had created something that defied every principle of military engineering. "We call them creativity missiles," he explained, as the weapons were loaded onto human ships. Each warhead contains a quantum computer loaded with human art, literature, and music. When they strike enemy vessels, they do not explode. They create what? Anything. Everything. The quantum computers analyze the target and generate completely original responses. Poetry that rewrites enemy programming. Music that disrupts their quantum phase states. Art that forces them to experience emotions they cannot process. It sounded insane. Using creativity as a weapon violated every principle of logical warfare. But humans had built their entire civilization on doing things that should not work. The battle for Earth was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human ships engaged Void Swarm vessels not with conventional weapons, but with pure imagination given physical form. missiles that created impromptu symphony orchestras in the vacuum of space, energy beams that painted abstract art across enemy hulls, defensive systems that generated poetry so beautiful it made swarm computers pause to appreciate it. The effect on the Void Swarm was devastating. Their adaptive programming could counter weapons and tactics, but it could not counter inspiration. When faced with genuine creativity rather than mathematical randomness, their quantum certainty began to break down completely. Captain Hyunwoo of the Arirang launched a missile loaded with children drawings from Earth elementary schools. The warhead struck a swarm command ship and filled its data networks with crayon pictures of families and pets, and impossible rainbow-colored animals. The enemy vessel flickered between dimensions for several minutes before materializing completely and broadcasting what could only be described as mechanical laughter. Commander, In-Young used her ship communications array to transmit Earth music directly into swarm computer cores. Jazz improvisation crashed their tactical systems. Rock and roll overloaded their power grids. Classical symphonies made their weapons fire in time with the music instead of at enemy targets, but the most effective weapon was deployed by engineer Kyungmin, who had loaded his cargo bay with human food from every culture on Earth. When he jettisoned the contents at an advancing swarm squadron, the enemy ships were forced to process data about taste and smell and cooking traditions, concepts so alien to their programming that several vessels simply stopped moving while their computers tried to understand why humans would put pineapple on pizza. The Void Swarm retreat was not a military withdrawal. It was a philosophical crisis. For the first time in their existence, they had encountered something that could not be analyzed, categorized, or countered. Pure human creativity in all its chaotic, illogical, magnificent diversity. Emperor Seokjin arrived aboard the Imperial flagship just as the last swarm ships disappeared into hyperspace. The proud ruler of the Dominion looked around the Sol system and saw something that changed his understanding of power itself. Admiral Dongmin, he said formally, the Galactic Council hereby grants humanity full membership with all rights and privileges. Your species has proven itself worthy of joining the galactic community. But Dongmin had a different idea. Emperor, with respect, we do not want to join your community. We want to help you build a better one. What do you mean? The Dominion has ruled through superior technology and military strength, but we have seen what happens when you face an enemy that can adapt to any technology and counter any military strategy. The galaxy needs something different. Over the following months, the old Galactic Dominion transformed into something new. The rigid hierarchy was replaced by a loose confederation of worlds that valued innovation over tradition. The crystal cities were supplemented by experimental colonies where different species worked together on impossible projects. Dr. Jin A. Terran Institute became the model for research centers throughout the galaxy. Instead of following established scientific methods, researchers were encouraged to try wild theories and impossible experiments. The failure rate was enormous, but the breakthroughs were revolutionary. The Void Swarm had not been destroyed. Long-range sensors detected them at the galaxy edge, apparently engaged in their own philosophical revolution. Intercepted transmissions suggested they were experimenting with concepts like art and humor and friendship. The ancient enemy was learning to be more than just an adaptive weapon. Do you think they will attack again? Admiral Quan Ho asked as he and Dongmin watched Earth turn slowly beneath their orbital station. Probably, Dongmin replied. But next time it will not be an invasion. It will be a cultural exchange. They want to understand what makes us creative, and we want to understand what makes them adaptive. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson of all. The greatest strength was not the ability to destroy your enemies. It was the ability to turn them into friends. And in that contest, humanity had always been the undisputed champions. The trial species had become the teachers. The ignored had become the leaders. And the galaxy was a better place because sometimes the craziest ideas turn out to be exactly what everyone needs.